Mummy. Or was it something else? It sure seemed like it. But I'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's see what the IMDb plot tells us about this one. The young daughter of a journalist disappears into the desert without a trace. 8 years later, the broken family is shocked when she is returned to them, as what should have been a joyful reunion turns into a living nightmare. Yes, it is. Um, all right, so this one is kind of in this series of bringing back some of the classic monster movies and so forth. Another version of it. We've seen maybe some different kinds of mummy movies here, um, but this one is has its own interesting way of going about it, and again, I will discuss that in a few moments, but let's, kind of expand just a touch on what the IMDb plot kind of set up there. So, yeah, we do see in the beginning, we're out here in the desert, and obviously a tragedy kind of, happens as a young little girl is disappears, and you see the parents are kind of frantic and kind of demanding the local authorities do something to help and so forth, but that really gets nowhere, and years then go by, and out of the blue almost, a freak accident happens, and there's a plane crash, and then a coffin is found, and in the miracle of it all, the little girl is somehow still alive in a weird, strange way. Um, Granted, she's not the same little girl. Obviously, some time has passed, but she's also uh, definitely changed physically and not maybe all mentally there, at least to start. So while she has returned to the family, and obviously any parent would be happy to have their child returned after, especially so much trauma and so forth, trying to get her back. That there's definitely this time period of healing and so forth, for the family themselves, and obviously for the young girl here. And mind you, the parents do have some other children here as well. It is not their only child, so their young children also kind of have to go through this. Um, Seeing their sister, who they're just not all that familiar with, also be in a weird, strange like state. Um, so as they bring her home and she's there, she's kind of got her own um, area of the home to stay in, and kind of heal and recover. The parents kind of try to keep her a little bit away from the other ones, because it's a little rough. Like I said, she's not the standard little girl here. Um, Soon enough, some weird stuff is going to start to happen, as the little girl, is starting to recover in slight ways and in different ways. Some weird stuff is going to start to happen, and this is going to make the family kind of start questioning, what is going on here, what's with our daughter, what should we do with her, and so forth, and obviously things are going to progressively get worse. And I'm not going to get too far into the movie about where we're going and so forth. Um, Obviously, you guys kind of know, somewhat of where this might be going. But I don't want to give away any of the twists and turns and so forth of it. Not that I wouldn't say it's a complete secret, but As I kind of alluded to at the beginning, this is supposed to be about a mummy and a mummy movie and so forth. And I mean, it kind of starts off that way. We have the desert and whatever, and even when the little girl in the coffin, and when the little girl is kind of returned, she's kind of wrapped up, and so you see those kind of things. But like I said, I didn't want to get too far into the back half of the movie, but for those that watched this movie already, maybe not those that haven't, um, as certain things kind of progress in this movie, and then you kind of find out, what is really going on, and why the little girl was picked, and why that happened to her, and so forth. You know, I couldn't help but feel that I wasn't, at some point I had switched from watching a mummy movie to a more of an exorcism movie. And, I kept thinking of, I believe it was The Exorcist 3, I think, or 2. I might get them all confused. But where we kind of see, like the desert scene and they're digging and whatever, and that kind of, again, kind of sparks the whole evil and the devil and so forth. And I was like kind of thinking, in the same lines, like, as opposed to this being the mummy, is it more about evil spirits and so forth, and then some of the things that happen in the back half of the movie with the little girl as she recovers, uh, and then what eventually happens at the end of the movie and everything. I just felt like at some point I stopped watching a movie about a mummy and started watching a movie that was kind of like an exorcist movie. So, I was like thoroughly confused by that. I wasn't sure what they were going to do when they brought the little girl back, and, when she went through her healing. Obviously, this is a horror movie, so, nothing good was going to happen. But, I had some kind of thoughts, okay, maybe the girl's going to kill the parents. There's other adults that came into the household. She could kill them in one way or the other and kind of do it more in a, I guess, so-called mummy-ish way to do it, I guess, and so forth. Uh, but instead, it, kind of morphs into this thing that, again, uh, not getting into specifics, I think those who have seen it might, if you didn't feel that way, maybe you're like, okay, well, maybe, he has something there. Or maybe you just think I'm out of my mind or whatever. I kind of did put it out there on social media. And I did kind of see, some response. And I kind of did some searches, and I did see that some people also felt this way. So I'm glad I wasn't, on the boat by myself here. Um, but I did, think that was just an odd turn in this movie and an odd way to go. Um, and that's not really what I wanted. Like, there's not a movie. At first, I wasn't even going to honestly watch the movie. I wasn't, so into, I have to see a mummy movie and so forth, and, whatever. I eventually just, it popped up, and I'm like, okay, I will give it a watch, and obviously saw a lot of talk about it, so, I said, okay, fine, I will give it a shot. Damn, it was over 2 hours too. So, but I think it seemed to at least get a decent response. It has an okay score here on IMDb. Uh, but I don't know that I had huge expectations one way or the other. But again, I thought I would see something more in the standard realm of what I would expect a mummy to do or not do and so forth. But to me, it tended to seem more like an exorcist type movie, especially when you see how things play out, even in the final big scene of the movie, and what happens there, and so that was just unexpected and just strange, and just like couldn't even be. I was just like, what is going on here? I'm expecting to see more of a monster movie, and instead, I'm seeing what feels like an exorcism movie. And if you guys have followed my reviews for a while now, like the Exorcist type movies that I honestly they've kind of worn on me. Like I feel like a lot of them, I'm seeing the same kind of stuff over and over, and not finding enough new stuff in them or different stuff in them, to thoroughly enjoy them. So again, as this kind of breaks into what feels like an exorcism movie, it kind of loses me. I'm just like, okay. Um, so and what is this movie? This movie was okay. It was rated R. I guess there's some moments here and there. I guess, but again, not huge on the blood and guts here. So obviously that disappoints me a little bit. Um, but yeah, I think that was the biggest thing that kind of bothered me about this movie, and kind of I guess didn't put, maybe I didn't enjoy it as maybe some of the other people apparently have. Um, just what I thought was coming and what didn't, and I guess if you want to put your own take on the Mummy and whatever, that's fine. I don't have a problem with them maybe wanting to change it up or whatever. I just think that maybe if you're doing a so-called monster movie, give it more of a monster, then kind of change it into an exorcism movie. Now I'm not going to say I've seen every movie that's based on a mummy, and maybe there's others that have taken a similar path and whatever with this leaning exorcism kind of direction way. But so maybe it's not the only one. But for me, and I guess I'm not looking for the standard of just this wrapped up person just moaning and groaning and maybe choking people to death kind of thing either. But still, maybe something closer to that than what actually happened. So with all of that said, I think I'm just gonna give it two pools of blood. It didn't overly excite me or whatever, and that whole becoming an exorcism movie, exorcist type movie, just was like, okay, whatever. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna go two pools of blood for this one. So with that, horrorreviews.blogspot.com is where you're gonna find all of my reviews written in video. Certainly tons of video reviews for a while now, so you can like and subscribe and do everything else that everybody does here on YouTube. If not, is okay. I thank you for your time regardless. Blue Sky, Facebook information down below. You can reach me there. Talk about this movie, other movies, horror, anytime. Or if you have something you want me to review, that's fine as well. And definitely in the comment section, did you guys also kind of get an exorcism movie type vibe, or am I truly crazy? Maybe I need to be mummified. I don't know. Maybe that would be cool one day. I don't know if that's the way to go. But anyway, with that, I will catch you on the next review, horror fans.